Hello and welcome to Full Scottish. My name is Duncan. Today I'm joined by Bosnian journalist and human rights activist Azra Berbić and Mike Small, founder of Bella Caledonia. Azra and Mike, you're welcome this afternoon.
Thank you for
Hi.
having us.
Right, we're gonna head straight to Ukraine updates on day 235. At least 11 people were killed and 15 wounded at military training grounds in southwest Russia's Belgorod region when two volunteers opened fire on other troops. The Russian Defense Ministry said the shooters were nationals from a former Soviet republic and had been shot dead after Saturday's shooting. Elon Musk has announced his company SpaceX will continue to pay for Starlink satellite internet in Ukraine a day after suggesting he could not keep funding the project. Russia has continued to try to hit Ukraine's energy infrastructure, but Vladimir Putin's forces do not appear to have enjoyed any significant success. Ukrainian forces have repelled Russia's attacks near the settlements of Novosodov, Yakovlivka, Berstov, Bakhmutsk, Opint, Kranoholivik, Nevelsk, Porovansk, Marinsk, and Pobieda. France will train up to 2,000 Ukrainian soldiers on its territory, France's Minister for Armed Forces told Le Palestin newspaper in an interview on Saturday. Iran has denied accusations it has supplied Russia with weapons to be used in the war in Ukraine, according to the statement from Iranian Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdallahian. A fuel depot in Russia's Belgorod region, which borders Ukraine, caught fire after shelling on Saturday. Its governor said without specifying the shelling's origin. The Russia Foreign Ministry has confirmed the re-equipment of Belarusian Su-25 aircraft to carry nuclear weapons, according to the Belarusian Hajun project. Ukrainian troops have launched an offensive in Kherson Oblast, and Kyiv Independent reported, while it has not been confirmed by Ukraine. Mike, if I may come to you, this has been a month of, lots of new, and continuous war. Where are we standing? Where do you think Ukraine is standing on this?
Well, Ukraine is making significant gains, clearly. It wasn't so long ago that people were saying that this was an unwinnable war and it was inevitable that Russia would win this war. But what's being exposed, I think, is the problem of supply chains, the slightly chaotic and desperate attempts to recruit men in Russia, often who are either much younger or much older than would be a normal recruitment age. And it does show signs of desperation from the Russian forces and increasingly beleaguered President Putin.
Right. Azra, I'd love to hear from you. Do you think this seems to be like the last day for Russia in this war?
Yeah, so when the Kiev was shelled last week, so I have a friend who lives in a suburb of Kiev, and I asked her how are they feeling, or if she's safe and her family, and she told me it was scary, but we don't care. We will overcome this. They are just scared, and I agree with her. They being Russians, because in this period of time, it has been shown that they have many issues, not only in supply chain, but within the system, within the army. There's a lot of nepotism and corruption that they just now seeing it. And luckily, the Western Europe and the world has shown solidarity to Ukraine, but not just with words, but with some concrete actions. So I don't believe this world is going to end really quickly, to be honest. They're not going to stop. They're going to try to use all the possible resources. They're going to their allies, probably, because this is really similar. The ideology and the way how they're using all of these war tactics against Ukrainian people is really similar to what we went through in the 90s. So I can deeply identify with people of Ukraine, and I will always stand in solidarity. But I just would hope that the war will end soon, even though I don't believe it is. But however, we always say, okay, the winter is coming. It's going to be a long winter for Europe, but also it's going to be a long winter for Russian people as well.
Thank you.
So we'll see.
Right. Today marks the sad 5th anniversary of the murder of Daphne Caruana. Right. So we'll come back to that story just towards the end of the show. But first, I'll go to Tory's economy crisis. First, we received this morning a release on on the Louise Truss, and this is what the S&P has to say as they are challenging the Scottish. Sorry, just a minute. So, can I start with you, Mike, on the is the writing on the wall for Liz Truss as bookmarker / the odds on her being ousted as MP, and with President Biden, the IMF, the markets, and just about every economist criticizing the mini budget. What will bring stability to the UK economy and protect the poorest of austerity and hardship? So coming back to the economy, what do you make of what has been happening in the last couple of days, Mike?
Yeah, it's been a shambles, and it's interesting that this is the shambles that was made out to be a beacon of economic stability, and we were told in 2014 that we had to attach ourselves to Britain because of its financial and economic stability, and anything else would be reckless. We've seen the pound crash, we've seen mortgages be stalled, and it really is a shambles politically and economically. So now there's open revolt, and I think this weekend is just going to be full of Tory grandees in the background plotting to have her removed. They've installed Jeremy Hunt, who is now effectively running the government, and rather than make her seem powerful or authoritative, I think throwing her first chancellor under the bus and then installing Hunt has now made her even more vulnerable and powerless. So I think it's a matter of days rather than weeks before she's removed, and we will have the third iteration of Tory rule. So I think that what's happening is financially and economically disastrous, but it also kind of exposes the lack of democracy within Britain, because we had the Tory leadership race touring the studios for weeks as if it was a democratic event. And then they chose somebody who was palpably, clearly not credible in this role. And they chose her because the Tory membership couldn't stomach Rishi Sunak. And this is the disaster that we're faced with. Anybody could see that she was clearly incapable of holding high office, but she was installed from on high, and we're all suffering the consequences.
And do you feel that the citizens are feeling like she has no plan now because there has been so many U-turns?
She has no plan now, and they're just eviscerating the mini budget piece by piece, abandoning it. I think Jeremy Hunt's already talked though about there will need to be cuts. So this is Tory ideology, and it doesn't really matter which version of them they put forward. They will punish the poor, and they will reflect their own powerful interests.
And what do you think is in the minds and the hearts of the people? Because there has been a feel of expecting more financial support, more protection, especially amidst the economic crisis. So where do you think the people are standing, and how are they feeling? Do you think?
Well, clearly, the polling is abysmal for the Conservatives, but because we have no real constitutional framework, there is no real mechanism for removing them from office. So Labour can be doing very well in polling in the blue wall, as was outlined this week, and the red wall, but it requires the Conservative Party's conscience to evict her or to hold a general election. And we're in that sort of predicament where they'll be looking at the polling thinking, well, the last thing we want to do is have a general election, because we'll all be out of office, we'll all be out of jobs. So the shambles will continue.
We've also had the SNP challenge challenge the Scottish Tories to grow a backbone and call for Liz Truss to get out of office. If I can quote Mhairi Black, the MP, he said, "With independence, we can escape the chaos of Westminster control for good and rid ourselves of Tory's government once and for all." So do you think for people supporting the independence, this is another show of why the independence will be important for Scotland?
Certainly. I think that the strongest case for the union had been in the past about fiscal and economic stability of Britain. And that is just shot. That's just ruined as an argument. It's not just the Conservative Party's reputation for financial responsibility that's ruined, but it's Britain's. On the other hand, there is a problem for the SNP, who issue their economic paper tomorrow, in that the rapid decline and collapse of the pound would be disastrous under sterlingisation, which is still the SNP's policy. So although on the one hand, the case for the union is completely undermined by the shambles that we're all observing, it's also a problem for the SNP's sterlingisation policy.
All right. If I can come to you, Azra, do you have anything to add on this?
Well, I'm not quite competent, but I believe whoever gets this job to do, it's not going to be easy for them, because whole Europe, and also the UK are going to this energy crisis, and it's just going to get worse, unfortunately, especially with how the currency is working in general. And it is, but at the end, it's the most challenging is for its citizens, because I have friends who live in London, and it is expensive. The life costs are getting more and more expensive. So whoever decides to create these measures that needs to be focused on regular citizens, middle class and lower class citizens, and just to help them. That's the only way to go.
Right. With the President Biden and MIF criticisms on the mini budget, what do you think will bring stability to the UK's economy and protect the poorest from what you've just said, Azra?
Well, I'm not an expert on that, and I don't have enough knowledge to comment on that. But from a perspective of an activist who always advocates for social justice, again, like it needs to be, all the measures have to be focused on regular citizens who are fighting, especially with the families with kids. You have to pay for school, you have to pay for food, for transportation, and now especially now in this period of time that people feel they are not safe, and when you have the government that's not taking and creating concrete measures to help you, and it's not just like that this crisis happened just a few weeks ago, it's already months. So just in order to keep your citizens safe, feeling safe that you are taking care of them and that you indeed care of their security and stability, the main thing is to focus all the measures on them and not big companies, and because at the end it's always the same wherever you go. At the end, the ones who are rich are going to get richer, even in the times of crisis, and but the regular citizens are suffering.
Coming back to you, Mike, how do you think the citizens can unpack this, and what can give them hope again moving forward?
Um, well, I think that the Conservatives need to be removed from office, and I think we need to form an independent Scotland. Obviously, the routes to both of those are difficult, and I think that in the 80s and 90s we got to a point where we were so traumatized by Conservative rule that the entire political movement became about removing the Tories from office, and we're kind of reliving that moment, and we sort of lose sight of what is it that you're actually replacing them with. What is the Labour alternative that's coming in? And so I think we're in danger of that again, because I think that Labour are doing very well because the Conservatives are such a shambles, not because they have a serious, credible, and good economic alternative. I think that things are coming to a real social crisis, though. I heard on the radio this morning poverty campaigners talking about somebody starving to death who was one of the people who visited their food banks. And, we are seeing economic meltdown and social crisis like we haven't seen in many, many decades.
Right. If I may start with you, Azra, on the, it's been 1 month on from the death of Mahsa Amini. The protests in Iran are still continuing. Is this the moment for change, or will the Iranian government step up its violent crackdown on women and protesters?
Well, I can only hope that the protests are going to continue, even though the system is going against the citizens, even with the violence. And I just this morning I watched the news that citizens and the police attacked this prison where the political prisoners are being held. I just only hope that the citizens of Iran are going to continue fighting against the system, because it is horrifying. It's not just oppressing women, but it's oppressing every different opinion, everyone that thinks different, especially the minorities. Minorities in Iran are extremely, extremely marginalized and being attacked, and violate their basic human rights are being violated on a daily basis. And for some minorities, it's not even allowed to have social security numbers. So if they attack them and if there are victims, it's really hard to keep up with the numbers. So I just only hope that people of Iran are going to stay united, because this is extremely, this has a capacity for revolution, a new revolution that people of Iran really need, fighting for their democratic rights and for their basic human rights. For me, especially as a Muslim woman, it is extremely important and inspiring, and I cannot even imagine how those women are feeling now, who are fighting against the oppression, who started these protests and this sort of let's call it a revolution. So I just hope that despite all the obstacles, they're going to persist in this, even though it is hard. The political system is extremely complicated and is fully in Iran is fully controlled by really old uh, male, and they are really well aware how this would affect them, and it is affecting them. So I just really hope that they persist in this again, and of course I hope that more of the world will stand in solidarity with them, with assistance, and that the world is going to react with more concrete actions in order to help and support people of Iran.
Right. So if I may come back to you, you said you're a Muslim, you don't have the scarf or the hijab, and it is okay, and you feel it's okay. There are some ladies who prefer to keep the hijab on. If you can explain to us what makes this different. Yes, it doesn't really call for someone to be arrested or to face such kind of brutality to a point of death. But what does this mean to different Muslim women practicing this, and even governments trying to make this part of the law?
Well, when it comes to Islam, it is a freedom of choice, and it should always be a freedom of choice, whether you want to feel that you need to wear a hijab. Um, so for the government to make that mandatory, it's not then you don't have, as a Muslim, it's against Islam first, to impose those that as a mandatory. It is. I would like to make a parallel between Europe and Iran, because in Iran, unfortunately, it is mandatory. I'm sure there are many women who would like to still continue wear a hijab, but that doesn't mean that we don't need to support, and that those women don't support women who don't want to wear it. And I completely support that. I always here in Bosnia and in this part of Europe, I always support all the women who wear hijab and who want. We recently had this case in Kosovo when during the campaign they promised that they are going to allow girls in high school to wear hijab if they want to, but now they're saying they're not going to allow it because. But that is a complex issue. You see throughout Europe, especially in France, there are a lot of cases of Islamophobia, and the cases of completely the Islamophobic decisions of banning women their freedom of choice. That's a basic human right, freedom of expression of your religious beliefs. And that doesn't affect anyone. Wearing a hijab doesn't affect anyone. But when it is imposed, and when you are threatened to be punished, but those are not like punishments, some sort of easy punishments. Those are really crucial punishments. So if you decide not to wear hijab or to show your hair, it is extreme violation of basic human rights, and it goes against Islam, because in Islam there is no force. There should be no force. So for me, from my perspective, it is a conflicting, because I have friends who wear hijab but who are openly supporting women in Iran, and that should be the level of emancipation among Muslim women should be that we need to understand that we equally need to support um, those Muslim women who are not unfortunately allowed to wear hijab in public institutions, in schools, but also as well we need as equally support women who don't want to wear it because it was forced on them.
Right. Coming to you, Mike, what is your view on this?
Well, I was lucky enough to have a writer report from Iran just yesterday, um, and their analysis was that this wasn't just about women's rights and gender issues, although women and young women and schoolgirls are leading many of the protests. They wrote that this was about freedom of speech, wider minority rights for LGBT people in Iran. It was about foreign policy, and it was about the environmental policy as well. I just want to read you a short bit from this. They wrote, "This movement is unique because it is converging and gathering all those demands and protests with people who fight for them together, because they all have understood that their needs won't be met individually, and what they are protesting against won't be stopped if they act alone." So I think what we see is a kind of convergence of many of the protest movements within Iran. And it's interesting to note that Iran is one of the countries that's supporting Russia in the war in Ukraine with military support. So I do hope that the protests escalate and are successful in creating a better future for Iran. But I also note that some of the journalists that I've been corresponding with are under attack, or under physical attack, and in real danger. So I would offer solidarity, but also hope that they are safe.
Talking about protesting and people being attacked, I had something over the news on, that there will be hasten of, or restrictions on how far people can go in terms of protesting. What's your general view on protesting? Could be here or anywhere in the world. Mike?
I'm generally in favor of people protesting, especially authoritarian regimes, whether that's ones in Britain or Iran, which is clearly far more repressive. But the need for direct action on the streets and mass movements to change society is absolutely essential.
Right. Azra, I just have to maybe bring this on because I've just thought about, there has been a lot of stigmatization when such things come up, like, oh, someone is not using a hijab. There was about Africans just not straightening their hairs and using their afros or extensions that amplify how their hair looks like, and different kinds of options. And this comes out like they're mostly affecting women. Do you feel that women are more policed and there's so much restriction on women globally?
Well, definitely. It's there is no need even to try to prove that. It is so evident and so obvious, unfortunately, and in different ways. I would completely agree with you. Women are being judged and policed on a different occasions for different reasons, many different reasons, and especially on their appearance, which is at this moment ridiculous for me. But I am in a privileged position, even though I live in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is deeply corrupt system, but still I have all the freedoms, and I have the freedom to fight for whenever my basic human rights are being violated, either on the streets or through the institutions, through media. On global level, women are being oppressed, and unfortunately, still the politics and everything that the main law are being created by men, and that's the case in Iran. That's the case all around the world. So they are deciding or how women should look like, what their basic human rights should be, what's the extent of it, whether we should wear a hijab or not to wear hijab, whether we should have access to decent healthcare and social security, whether we should have access to education, whether we should even have access to travel. So it is, we still live in a globally in a deeply oppressed world, especially in Africa, because especially after the COVID, we saw that many women have an access to healthcare, but also don't even have the access to institution, and then they don't even have the voice to share the issues that they are fighting against, and all the daily obstacles. Many of them don't have access to internet and to social media, and when they are the ones who are loud and who are brave enough to be loud, then they are being targeted, both physically, like in real world, but also online. So it is it is extremely a complex issue. But for me, it's really interesting how all of these movements, big movements, also for climate justice, are led by women. So that gives me a lot of hope. But I believe that the main thing is for women to have access globally, on a global level. They should have guaranteed access to healthcare and to education, and that would complete the course of the world in general. Unfortunately, that's still not the case. Again, even in my home country, even the education and health care, it's a promise to you, and it is imposed by law. But still, many women, mostly women, uh, do not have the access to. So I can only imagine how it is in some parts of Asia and Africa and South America.
Right. And I'll move on to the Capitol attack. Panel votes to Sabina Trump. So, Mike, if I can start with you. Following the latest January 6th hearing, the Senate committee investigating the attempted coup passed a motion to subpoena ex-President Trump, along with the FBI and New York City criminal investigation. Could Trump finally end up in court?
Well,
Mike.
I think he's got very expensive lawyers who will delay that for as long as possible. It may well be that he is eventually dragged into court, but I think that extreme wealth has a history of protecting the wealthy. It may be that the time will come where he is taken to court. He was clearly implicit in the attacks on the Capitol. He can be seen in live time extorting the crowd to attack. And if you've watched the documentary on the day, it's clear that there is a network of far right Trump supporters who were behind it, and he was clearly motivating them. So I hope very much that he goes to court and is jailed for that. I'm skeptical that will happen because I'm skeptical of American legal justice.
Right. I'll throw the same question to you, Azra. What are your thoughts on this? It's been a long way coming, and the committee, the Senate committee, feels very positive about going to court. Well, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, again, I tried to follow it as much as I could, but from my perspective, I would also, again, I would hope so that that's going to happen. But again, I also have many doubts that's going to be the case, and especially this would be an extremely unique case of a former American president being at court and being held accountable for attempt of cope. That's how I see it. So, and it's not just that; it's extreme violence and targeting people who are members of Congress and Senate and who were members of Congress were at the time there at the building. So for me, that was an act of domestic terrorism, and that's how it should be dealt with. And but highly doubt that that's going to be the case. There are people who've been already prosecuted for the acts of violence and domestic terrorism, but to hold accountable a former American president for such thing, it would be. I'm not even whether the Democrats now would support that. Maybe some of them would, but it's how you also present America to the world. And America is a world policeman, but and it has been an ally for a lot of countries. But again, in their own garden, they weren't prepared to deal with all of those things. And people should be held accountable. And I strongly believe Trump, because he invited all of those people and he inspired them. He was the one who was telling them to act so. But again, I highly doubt that that's going to be the case. I would be really happy even if he would end up in court, just to see, because I believe that would be then open to public, and then we would see everything that was happening before that and after that in a larger scale, and we would have access to way more information.
Mike, we've seen, this is, people are hoping that Trump will go to court. But there's still another side where people don't believe he will go. And if he goes, there won't be justice. But what does this say to the world we are living in right now, considering what's going on, all over with Russia, US and, other countries?
Yeah, we are living in the cliche is unprecedented times, but I think in USA in particular, the rule of law is under strain, and I think that was the whole point of the attack on the Capitol, is that the Trump administration and their supporters, a far right movement, including militia, couldn't cope with the fact that they were facing electoral defeat, and it is extraordinary for an incumbent president not to accept the result. And I think that what we're seeing is a shift to the far right, inspired by Christian fundamentalism, Christian nationalism, repression of women, as we can see with the abandonment of the Roe v. Wade law on abortion. And I think that this sort of abandonment of reason and an attack on the rule of law is fueled by the paranoia of the conspiracy world and the online world that we've seen as central to the Trump movement. And I think that that's a far deeper problem and crisis for American society, not just about Trump as a candidate or a president. I think there's a far deeper crisis in that society and further afield.
Right. So I will move on to EU. Following the highly criticized changes to Bosnia's election law announced by High Representative Christian Schmidt as the polls closed, the EU has recommended candidate status for Bosnia and Herzegovina. So, yeah, Azra, I want to start with you because this is where you are. Bring us up to speed.
Well, yeah, we had a really broad discussion on it. I don't believe that this is anything new. So how they proposed it and talked about it is that, okay, we are promising to give you a candidate status, and Council of European Union is going to vote on this in December if you deliver all of these things that we ask you to do too. But it's nothing new. For more than 10 years, we already knew our political elites were responsible to deliver all of that. Those are different set of laws, changes to the prosecution, it's a different sets of laws that are asked from us to have them in order to gain a candidacy status. But from my own perspective, personal perspective, even though it is encouraging, I believe that the EU now is reacting and is more active with the measures towards the Western Balkans regions, do the eye-opening with Ukraine, because we've been warning the civil and human rights activists in this region. We've been warning the EU officials that that the influence of Russia is highly increasing, as well influence of China and Turkey. So now I believe they are reacting to that. But again, taking in consideration all of these, I believe it's still political crisis, even though we are still waiting to the final results of the elections, believe it or not. We still don't have all the results. And some votes for the place of president of Republic of Srpska entity is going to be again. They have to go through it again, because it was proven that there has been a lot of frauds. So I'm not even sure whether we're going to be having formed governments, both on entity level, but also on a national level, on a state level, until December. So therefore, there is no way that we are going to be able to have all of these sets of new laws and all of these changes, and to deliver everything that was asked from us to do.
So are you trying to say that this is not on its last, uh, towards the like Bosnia getting into the EU, or are you trying to say that it's, it is not what it looks like? It is just because of it is politics, not in black and white.
Well, actually, it's mostly gray. It's not black and white. It's mostly gray. Again, I don't feel hopeful at all that we're going to have this result. And even if getting candidacy status, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't guarantee you anything. I would hope for, like, I wouldn't want, as a citizen of Bosnia and Herzegovina, as someone who is extremely active in this civil society sector, and someone who's constantly trying to make our politicians work and act. I wouldn't want to get anything just out of blue, not even the candidacy status, because that doesn't guarantee us anything and doesn't mean anything. You see that with the case of Turkey. They are going for years backwards, especially when it comes to the level of respecting of human rights. They're going backwards. And unfortunately, in many cases in Bosnia and Herzegovina as well. So, and again, I don't believe that political elites would like to end up in European Union. They say, okay, we want to bring this country to the EU, but everything that they're doing and that they've done in past 2 decades showed us that they don't want, actually. Because in order to be part of the European Union, we would have to change the system. We would have to first fight against corruption and nepotism, ethnic nepotism, how I like to call it, because it is at the end all about their interest of ruling political parties, and most of them are extreme left. Actually, all of them are extreme nationalist parties. So, in order to get to the EU, a lot of them would end up in jails. Like that was the case in Croatia. Just before Croatia joined the EU, a lot of highly profiled politicians ended up in courts and in jails. So in order to get that, they would have to sacrifice their positions. And I don't believe they are willing to do that. But also, at this point, I don't even believe they have the capacity to understand what it takes to get this country to the EU. So I don't feel hopeful. I don't feel that spirit. I don't feel the ambition among the political elites to bring us there.
And if I can take you slightly back, could you tell us, being, down there in Bosnia and being in the country, what these highly criticized changes in Bosnia's election law are and how that is going?
Well, at first, as a citizen, I felt completely ambushed, because just after the day, So the polls closed and we voted, and we were waiting for the first preliminary results from the Central Electoral Committee. Then you get the news just not even an hour after they started counting the votes, that the Constitution of Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina and electoral law are going to be changed. And to be honest, there are some really good changes within the law, even though I don't believe that's going to be work. We are able at this point to make those working mechanisms, such as, for example, there is this change in a law that the federal parliament and the bodies of federal parliament are going to have to create a mechanism for of a citizen initiative for citizens to ask from a federal parliament to impose certain laws. So that's a great mechanism. Many European Union countries don't have that opportunity on that big level, because so far we only had that opportunity to use it on a local level, and I've used it in my hometown, and many people use it all around country. But we've been warning the international community that that these changes, because there was a lot of talks about it, because we found out through the media that he is about to impose changes. And he was denying that that's going to bring further segregation and discrimination. But from what we know so far, it is actually, it's going to bring even more discrimination and segregation. And for me, as a Bosnian, I'm a Bosnian, so I would be qualified as the other. Then I would be additionally even more discriminated. But even for these constitutional people, which are constitutional people are part of the constitution, and there are these syntagma of constitutional people is almost in all main laws, and that means that Serbs, Croats, and Bosniaks need to be as equally as represented.
So, Mike, as we try to get Azra back, I'd like your opinion on this. The European Enlargement Commissioner, Oliver Valier, said that, Bosnia leaders should use this candidate recommendation as opportunity. And it sounds so good, but, hearing from Azra, it's not in black and white. What's your opinion on this?
I mean, to be honest, I would defer to Azra on this subject. That I don't know enough about it. The only thing I would say is that the consequences of Russia's war in Ukraine are kind of filtering out across Europe and having consequences far beyond his original intention. But on the details of Bosnia, I would just defer to Basra, to Azra.
Right. Azra, sorry, we had lost you for a minute.
Yeah, I apologize for that. I
Yeah.
didn't figure it out. Yeah, maybe just to conclude again.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, from what I've seen until now, that these imposed changes of law will bring even more segregation and discrimination and unequal representation in legal bodies and public institutions. But however, when it comes to the EU, again, like what Mike said, it is obvious that these actions from the EU are just more concrete reaction to what was happening with the influence of Russia. But I'm afraid that that's it's a bit late. Not from a point of okay, it's not impossible. We are going to turn to Russia, Turkey, and China. That's not the case, but still, the influence is really strong. And with not that much money, they managed to create the influence and to destabilize the region, whole region. And we saw that in Serbia, in Kosovo recently, in last 2 years, in Montenegro, and also in Bosnia and Herzegovina, especially in Republic of Srpska entity. So the influence is big, and again, I don't believe it's not all up to the EU. Unfortunately, the EU didn't had clear and good politics towards the Western Balkans in last 10 years because they had their own issues. I understand that. So now, when all of this is happening, unfortunately, and how they saw our political leaders, not just in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but throughout all these region, it is for us. It was at some point even ridiculous because we didn't saw them as equal as they saw them because they identified them as adequate partners in negotiation, but those people are not willing. And again, I would just conclude, I would hope for that we could get candidacy status in the but I don't believe that's possible. It's not logically possible because we don't even have the formed governments. And in order to impose all of these sets of laws, you have to, and the procedure is extremely complicated in the case of Bosnia and Herzegovina, especially on a federal level, on a level of Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, but also on a national level, because there are so many of these opportunities for certain political elites from certain ethnic groups to block the progress. And that's what's been happening for a decade or more now. So I don't believe that's going to be any different.
Okay. So now, Mike, I will engage you on the Supreme Court second independence referendum hearing. This week, the Lord Advocate for Scotland asked the UK Supreme Court to clarify if Scotland has the right to hold an advisory referendum on Scottish independence. The UK government opposed the right of Scotland to hold a referendum and opposed the Supreme Court from even hearing the Supreme Court from even hearing the reference. Does Scotland have the legal right to self-determination if the UK says no? What are your thoughts?
It's a very peculiar position. It's an attempt to have a legal answer to a political question. Clearly, the First Minister is trying to resolve the legality of the referendum. But I think that there's a couple of things interesting that have emerged. The first is that I don't think it's as legally certain as a lot of the unionist commentariat are suggesting, and it will take several months for this to unfold. But even if we assume that they are right and that the Supreme Court says there is no right for a legal referendum, I don't think that that is the political victory that they think it is, because they are effectively saying to people, there is no route for you to express your democratic will. This is illegal. Now, at that point, you are not in a union with two voluntary parts. You are basically told that regardless of the democratic outcome of votes in your country, you cannot negotiate your way out of that union. And that is an extraordinary position to be in, and it is not the victory that they think it is. It will fuel forces towards independence, who are also fueled by watching the utter shambles of the British state unfold day by day, week by week.
And do you think, as we were discussing earlier, the chaos happening within the Tory will, push more people towards wanting this independence?
Yeah, as I said, I think that the process is disempowering, and it looks very distant, and as if we don't have agency, and that's because that's true. I suspect if it's won, then we will go ahead with a referendum, and it will be legal, and there'll be nothing they can do. And if it's lost, they will be telling people there is no legal route out of this union. So I see it as, some people see it as a lose-lose. I see it in that sense as potentially a win-win for the independence movement.
Right. Thank you both for discussing with me this afternoon. And also, yeah, I would like to, and I would like to also engage you on the last story here on Daphne Caruana Galizia. So I'm getting communication that Azra would like to hear your opinion on the independence of Scotland story.
Well, I don't have enough knowledge again about it, but I would I believe that with all of these crises that is happening all around Europe, but especially with the UK, that there are more chances. And if people have will, if general public wants to have a referendum, they should have a referendum. That's their own right and choice. But again, comparing with it with the situations in the region, it is a difficult, because it's at the end it's not just a question of your freedom to the independence, it's also your right to decide about it. It's also an extremely important and big political question, and that was the case with Bosnia and Herzegovina. Again, when we voted our independence from former Yugoslavia, and it was not easy. But if people really wanted, then they should have the right to decide on it, and to be aware of all of the possible consequences again, and the benefits.
Right. Okay. So moving on, today marks the sad fifth anniversary of the murder of Daphne Caruana Galizia, the fearless Maltese reporter who sought truth and refused to be silent. If you wish to show your support, Scottish Pen are holding a vigil to honour the memory of Daphne today at 6:30 p.m. at the Scottish Parliament in Edinburgh. So, So thank you so much to my guests for joining us this afternoon, and to all of you who are at home. Well, this is it for this week's Full Scottish. And before I go, I just want to remind you that at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. So to everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you very much. Our programs will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. We have set ourselves a target of adding 10,000 new subscribers to enable us to employ staff to make more programs. It is goodbye and thank you for watching.